Hey there, and welcome to episode 129 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. On this episode, our guest is an entrepreneur and engineer who has developed a very unique piece of technology for the blind and visually impaired. And this device provides tactile feedback in a variety of scenarios and situations, including for sporting events. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing what led this guest into this line of work and this area of focus to help benefit the blind and visually impaired community, as well as the numerous applications of this technology. So let's go ahead now and get rolling with episode 129 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. All right, so my guest here on this episode of Eyes Free Sports is Dave Schleppenbach, and Dave is the founder and CEO of Tactile Engineering and has developed some really unique technology for the blind and visually impaired. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. And I've read about your technology, and we had connected several months back, and definitely recall some of that conversation, but really intrigued to get into this. And obviously, in terms of sports, a lot of sports participants and fans of this podcast. So definitely excited to discuss kind of the sports applications of this technology as well.
Yeah, I am excited to talk about that. I have a great interest in sports myself. Played a lot of sports when I was younger, and even though I'm a little bit too old to make my debut as a Major League Baseball player, I can still enjoy watching.
Sure, absolutely. We'll take what we can get, right?
Exactly.
Yep. All right, so why don't we just dive in here and just kind of kick things off with the introduction of yourself. If you just want to kind of tell the folks, who Dave Schleppenbach is and your professional background.
Well, sure. I always hate talking about myself, but you do radio shows and podcasts and so forth, and you have to. I grew up in rural Midwest, just in a farming community, where people were of very modest means, and when I was a kid, you never know what you want to do, and I actually wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I have very fond memories of listening to the great Jack Buck and Harry Carey on the radio, bringing the baseball games. My team was the St. Louis Cardinals.
Sure.
And so I played sports, like I mentioned, and I also enjoyed school because it was sort of a magical place as a farm boy to go to this area where all these books were to talk about things that, I thought I would never see in my life, right? Yeah. All these far away and exotic places and exotic technologies. So as I grew up, I went into the field of science and math. So I ended up getting degrees in chemistry and mathematics. I went to graduate school at Purdue University and continued on studying chemical physics. So I was in the hard sciences, and I had an interest in helping people with disabilities. I ended up teaching several students at Purdue who were visually impaired, and they were taking calculus, physics, chemistry, biology, very difficult subjects. So that got me sort of interested as a hobby, so to speak, in the idea of assistive technology and teaching methods. And based on that, I then ended up doing research at Purdue in a lab that was designed to help figure out how to make science and math content more accessible to students with disabilities. And during that time, I was talking to the president of the university, and he said, "Hey, we have this new program that is an entrepreneurship program. This is a thing now that many universities do. And we'd like you to consider starting a business to do something in your field." Well, if I had only known then, right, maybe I'd have gone back and tried out with the Cincinnati Reds or something instead. But
right.
I guess for some crazy reason, I decided to become an entrepreneur. And several decades later, here I am, having been a serial entrepreneur, as they say, which sounds worse than it is. I only know where some of the bodies are buried, I guess. And I did a number of high-tech startups, mostly in the assistive technology field, which is technology for people with disabilities. I've also done some medical devices, some things in the video game area. I've done software startups, just a little bit of everything, I guess.
Interesting. Wow. Quite a versatile background and skill set, it sounds like.
It's funny because I never really knew what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I guess maybe I still don't, but I did study a lot of diverse things, and I really don't regret that at all, because it never ceases to amaze me how something I learned in history class or math or even simple things like, just playing sports comes up in daily life. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be very well-rounded to sort of be prepared for anything.
Right. Absolutely. So I know you did mention having taught, blind and visually impaired students in some of your classes over the years. So I'm just curious about that connection. How did you kind of develop this kind of connection and maybe affinity for specifically focusing on, helping the blind and visually impaired community?
Well, I had some experience with having a visually impaired family member, so I had at least a general awareness of the concept. And because of that, when I was teaching at Purdue, they said, "Hey, we have some incoming students who are blind, so we're going to assign you because you're the person that knows what to do." And I said, "Well, I know what some of the words mean, right? But I don't. Where are all the resources?" And back in the 1990s, there wasn't really a lot of resource available for teaching students science and math, which are very difficult topics. They're very visual. So we had to kind of invent a lot of that. And I have 3 students who I remember very fondly, who I worked with as incoming freshmen into college. All 3 were blind. 2 of them went on to get PhDs in chemistry, and one got multiple master's degrees.
Wow.
And in fact, one of them got his PhD from Cambridge.
Oh, wow.
So,
amazing.
In spite of me as a teacher, somehow they were able to succeed, right? I gave them quite the disadvantage, but that really made me understand that there's a whole world out there that most people don't think about or understand, that people with a visual impairment or other types of disabilities could be doing all these great things if we just made the topic more accessible. And I, being in science and technology, thought, well, gee, here we are in the year 2000. We have all this great technology. There's got to be a way to use that to enhance people's lives who are dealing with one type of disability or another. And so that's really what drew me to the field, was the challenge.
Right. Interesting. So then in terms of Tactile Engineering, I believe you launched it in 2013, and just talk to me about kind of the inspiration for starting this company.
Yeah, so it's been a journey. I like to say it was an overnight success after 30 years, right? So back in the 1990s, when I was at Purdue, I had worked on the idea of creating a large refreshable tactile array. I had even filed some patents, which have since issued and expired, and we had a number of different technologies we had worked on. I like to tell a little story, which is in the 1990s, a gentleman by the name of Dean Blasey, who is pretty well known in the field as the inventor of the piezoelectric braille display, which is the single line display that's been commonplace for the past several decades. He flew to Purdue in his airplane to evaluate our technology, and he told us it was very clever. He was very impressed, but he didn't think he'd be able to manufacture it, and we should keep working. And that was very disappointing to a young man who thought, maybe I had come up with a good idea that could change the world. So this has been in the back of my head ever since then. I've been working on it on and off for many decades. And recently, my partners and I had kind of hit a breakthrough in the 2010s, as you mentioned. And we were able to build some prototypes and file some patents and realize, hey, this thing has real potential. And from that, Tactile Engineering was born. Several years of R&D ensued. And then in the late 2010s, we got serious about this and really started moving towards our product launch, which was about 15 months ago. And I'm very pleased to report that earlier this year, Dean Blasey once again flew his airplane to Lafayette, Indiana, where we're located, came to our factory and visited us and saw the technology that we've developed with our Cadence Braille tablet. And he said, I can't believe this. You guys have finally cracked this. I believe this will work. It's a great innovation. And I can't believe you're still working on it after 30 years. So like I said, it's been an overnight success. It only took 30 years to do.
Oh, wow. That is funny. You never know, right?
You never know. And perseverance is probably the most important characteristic for anyone that wants to be an entrepreneur. And I can easily relate it to sports, having played baseball most of my life and some other sports too, like basketball and tennis. And I ran competitively for a while. And so anyone who's competed in a sport, the match is won in practice, right?
Right.
It's the months and months of daily training where you develop the skill, the stamina, the strength to win that match. And the actual event, is generally much easier than the practice was. And like an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. It's a small accumulation of doing tasks every day over a long period of time that results in that success. There's really no shortcut. And the same is true if you talk to any professional athlete, they'll tell you about the years of training and sacrifice. No shortcuts.
Right. So true. So in terms of this Cadence Braille tablet, if you just kind of want to talk about how it works, its main functionalities, etc.
Sure. So it's a handheld electronic device. And so you can think about it if you have an iPhone, which many visually impaired people do. It's about the same size, shape, and weight as an iPhone. But the surface of it has a series of pins that move up and down, like a refreshable Braille display if you've ever used one of those. The main difference being that the pins cover the entire device, and we can make a device of any size. We're not limited to just a single line of text. So you can take more than one Cadence and just put them next to each other. And it's like using multiple computer monitors. The image just stretches across however many of Cadence displays that you have. So in the smallest configuration, the pocket size one, you end up with 384 dots in your hand. You can do 4 lines of Braille, or you can do graphics. You can do raised print. You can do animations, and we'll get into that in a little bit to talk about how that's useful for sporting events. And then if you put multiple together, you can end up with a very large surface, which would be useful for things like maps or science and math and so forth. So the device also has a software ecosystem, which is called Cadence OS, where we have a bunch of applications to do some pretty crazy things. There's a lot of things involving education, of course, training for workforce to help people with their jobs. But we also include a lot of games and entertainment because we feel that that is a very important way to bring the world together and to let people experience things truly together and inclusively, whether you have a visual impairment or not. We have also utilized the Cadence with some other populations of disabled people, including people with autism and people that get occupational therapy. We call it tactile therapy. But the whole point of it is to help you learn to utilize your sense of touch to help assist you in life, however that might be of assistance to you. And people think, well, it's, I can't learn to read Braille, or I can't do tactile graphics, or my fingers aren't sensitive enough. And we've worked with all sorts of people of ages 3 to ages 90, people that had neuropathy, people that are diabetic and or has scarring on their fingertips, all sorts of folks, ex-military, and we've been able to help them achieve tactile skills despite their objections, so to speak.
Right.
And I think it can enhance anybody's life. It is fully compatible with existing technologies that are already out there. So if you want to use it with your iPhone and VoiceOver, you can do that. If you want to use it with a screen reader, you can do that. It's meant to be a device to promote independence. That's the basic concept.
Wow. It's just the more you describe that, it's like, wow, the possibilities literally are endless, in terms of the applications of this technology.
It's kind of amazing. I always am surprised myself at what some of the users come up with. And we actually support people creating their own apps and content. And in fact, I was just recently down in Orlando, as I mentioned to you before the show. And I have another friend down there who's visually impaired, and he had been using this to view videos on YouTube of time-lapse photography of various things. And the Cadence can actually play videos. We had previously, over the summer, done a live broadcast of the 4th of July fireworks from Orlando.
Oh,
so
wow.
I had gone and set up my camera, streamed it right to the Cadence, and he was able to feel the fireworks in real time as they were being launched into the sky. And we did a descriptive audio broadcast on the radio as well at the same time. So it was a pretty cool event.
Oh, wow. That's so fascinating. So then as far as sports, I know you have done some things already, and I think there are some plans potentially in the future in terms of how this can be applied to, especially specifically when it comes to like blind and visually impaired sports fans attending, live sporting events.
Yeah, we have some real big plans there. And having been an athlete myself, I always feel like sports is such an integral part of our culture. I have a lot of friends who are current or former Major League Baseball players, for example, which is the sport I have the soft spot for as a young boy growing up and dreaming of being a baseball player someday. But we also have connections with football, hockey, soccer, and just about every other type of sport you can think basketball. So what we've done to date is some interesting broadcasts where we will take the Cadence and hook it up to the data feed from the sporting venue. And what's interesting is for modern sporting fans, there are so much data available now. I'll take baseball as an example. For those of you who like to watch or listen to baseball, MLB now has an app called MLB at Bat, which is on an iPhone or Android, and that streams the data that comes out of MLB Advanced Media. That data, which is full of just all sorts of information using technology called StatCast, can tell you the exact position of every player on the field, the position of the ball at all times, the speed, the rotation, the how fast someone's running, the odds that someone will make a catch, all of that is available in real time on the app. And in fact, it's emulated visually on the screen by a bunch of small pixels kind of running around the screen, so to speak, moving around the screen. And my first thought when I watched that as a sighted baseball fan, I said, well, gee, this would be perfect as a tactile representation. We could take these little pixels of players and the ball moving, and we could lay out a tactile diamond on the Cadence, and we could move these little players around. So I tried that, and it worked remarkably well. And that kind of inspired me to say, well, we could do this with every sport. If you go to almost any sporting event now of the professional leagues, all of that data is in the stadiums. They have cameras, lasers, and so forth recording all of this. And almost every sport has apps that stream that data alongside the TV and radio broadcasts. So I'll give a real world example of what we did last summer and what we plan to do a lot more of 2025, we partnered with Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we brought the Indianapolis 500 race live using this technology. So we were able to simulcast two things. One was a descriptive audio stream of the race through our radio partner, which is the Blind and Beyond radio show. And we then simultaneously were able to take the data, the telemetry from the data truck at the race, and show the cars moving around the track on the Cadence in real time. So a viewer could zoom in on a particular car and get the data, and there's extensive data for racing. I mean, more data than you could ever imagine.
Sure.
Things like how fast the car is, how many times the driver pushes the brake, what G-force the driver has experienced. It's ridiculous, right? The engine temperature, things that you would never think of. And then as well as, feeling the position of the cars as they go around the track, who's in first, who's in second. What was really special about that event is this was one of the closest races in history of the Indianapolis 500. It came down to the last lap, basically. Very exciting. And it happened to be the first event that we had ever done live. So it was a treat for everyone, the listeners and those that would follow along with the Cadence. And so our vision is to do that for every major sport. And we've been talking to the league commissioners and the owners of teams to encourage them to incorporate this same technology, because it really doesn't require much. We just need access to the existing data feeds that they already have. And then someone who's visually impaired could simply bring their Cadence to the arena, follow along with their fingers as they're enjoying the sport in real time with other fans. Or if they're at home, they could follow along with their fingers while they're listening to the radio or TV broadcast.
Wow. And then so essentially they would just connect the device to their phone, or how would they actually be capturing that data that's transferred to the device?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the Cadence can connect to a host device, which could be a phone, a tablet, or a computer. And so in the case of, let's just take baseball, for example, with that MLB at-bat app on your iPhone, you could just connect the two, and you would be able to follow along in tactile format as the game was progressing. And really all this takes is just a little bit of conversation between us and the leagues that own the data, and a little bit of willingness on their side to simply allow us to have access to that data feed. Other than that, it's there's not much that needs to be done. So we're hoping by minimizing the ask, so to speak, with these sports leagues, encouraging them of the benefit of attracting fans with disabilities that might not be able to fully enjoy the game otherwise, that they'll be encouraged to allow this to happen.
Sure. Very cool. And I'm curious, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the leaders? You mentioned commissioners, owners, kind of the leaders within these sports leagues, and do they seem to be pretty interested and intrigued?
I think it's been a very interesting experience for me, because the first reaction I get almost inevitably is surprise. They say, well, we didn't even know that someone with a visual impairment would be interested in this. We never thought about it before. And then I talk to them about, people that I know who are visually impaired, who are sports fans, and how much they enjoy something and what they do currently to try to enjoy the games. And the reaction I get then after they've thought about it for a minute is, well, we'd love to do this. The more fans, the better. This is great. So we haven't had really any negative reactions. It always involves people doing actual technical work, because there's a difference between a commissioner saying, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, and then getting the exact data feed lined up and programmed correctly and so forth. But that's why we're encouraged about this. We think we'll see a lot of progress towards that on the technical side in 2025. And our goal would be to be able to bring any major sporting event that happens to someone with a visual impairment live on the Cadence, so that they can enjoy it just like anyone else can. And a point that I've often made to the commissioners and the owners of the teams is, if someone is a regular fan without a disability, they will pay a certain amount of money to have access to the games. Maybe they'll pay $10 a month for the app or whatever the cost might be. I don't think it's any different for someone who is a visually impaired fan. They're a fan. So, of course, they would want to have a subscription to whatever the, broadcasting system is, whether it's through a television, radio, or on a device. And they're also going to want to buy jerseys, and they're going to want to, get their team colors. And it's just like anyone else. Fans are fans. And why wouldn't you want more fans? That can only help you. So that argument seems to resonate pretty well with the owners of teams.
Sure. Interesting. I'm also curious about like the Paralympics or, for example, goalball tournaments, speedball tournaments, perhaps events that involve, blind and visually impaired folks, and then the fans of those events attending them live or watching them on TV or a stream, and kind of how that might work. I assume there would have to be some kind of data or information about the events going on to be able to be consumed.
Yeah, so we're pretty excited about that as well. We had an opportunity, one of my colleagues had an opportunity to work with NBC during the Olympics this past summer, doing the descriptive audio broadcasts of the Olympic Games. And as it turns out, the Paralympics uses the very same venues and technology, so that data is available. And could be consumed in that way. The other things you mentioned are all of great interest to us. One that I particularly am excited about, there is a World Blind Baseball Association and competition. And I worked a little bit with one of the blind baseball teams to sort of promote that concept. And they have formed a commissioner league and so forth. And in fact, last year they were able to compete at the World Championships, a team from the United States, which is a really interesting sport when you think about how challenging baseball is just in general, and then taking that to the next level, without having the use of your vision. So we'd like to promote more things like that. And a long-term dream of mine, and I've gotten some early interest in this, would be to take those special sports such as beep ball and goal ball and blind baseball and that sort of thing, and have the teams compete with professional teams, maybe at spring training or during the exhibition game. The athletes I've talked to about this were very interested. They said, what a great idea to bring more awareness and interest to their own sport. So the goal we would have for future would be have one of the teams that competes, for example, in Florida during spring training for Major League Baseball, compete with one of the blind baseball teams, with the rules of blind baseball in effect, and use that to help bring awareness and interest in this concept, which would then in turn drive our ability to broadcast these events for everybody to enjoy.
Yeah. And wow, what an amazing concept that would be, not only what a cool experience for the blind athletes themselves, but the sighted, professional athletes just getting to experience, stepping into the shoes of a blind athlete and kind of seeing what it's like. I mean, so many fascinating possibilities there.
It really is. And I think, just again, thinking to my own experience as an athlete, if someone had told me, hey, if you put a blindfold on and practice hitting balls off a tee and running to first base, it'll improve your skill in the ordinary game of baseball, I would have done it in a minute. Anything that would improve my skill, I would do, right? So
exactly.
The thought process is that, if you get the athletes interested, then the rest of it takes care of itself.
Right. Just in terms of feedback that you've gotten from those who have used the device, tested the device, definitely curious in general, any common themes or anything you want to mention on that front?
Well, we've been really fortunate so far. We launched this product in August of 2023. And interestingly, we've been back ordered since the day we launched it. So we're always a couple months behind the ability to ship. And these are very complex devices. We had to build a high-tech robotic assembly factory in Lafayette, Indiana, to manufacture the devices. Each device has 3,500 parts.
Wow.
And those parts are assembled at a tolerance that is at the micron level. It's really just unbelievable. So it's very hard to do. And one of the things I try to do is to have my workers interact with people with visual impairments as often as possible who are using the device, because it helps them to understand why they're doing what they're doing and to provide motivation. You know, some days are challenging. All the robots broke and everybody's disappointed. You know, we have to persevere through that, just like an athlete has to persevere through a hitting slump in baseball, and just trust that this will work out. So I rely on feedback from people with visual impairment users a lot. And that feedback so far has really been very uplifting emotionally. People love the device. They love using it. In some cases, it's been life-changing for them to open up all new worlds. I have so many stories of hundreds and hundreds of people who have used this and have called to tell me about what they've done, or I've been to their home to help them set up the device, and they've talked about their dreams and goals. We have grandmothers who are visually impaired playing tic-tac-toe with their grandchildren for the first time. We have people getting new jobs and succeeding because they now can access a spreadsheet the same way that a sighted person would access a spreadsheet. We have people in school who, you know, want to work for NASA someday but have a visual impairment, who are able to do their mathematics because they have access to a real-time graphing calculator. You know, just things of that nature. The feedback we've gotten so far, really, I can summarize as: please keep going. Please make more. Do more apps. Do more features. Make more devices. And that, I cannot tell you how important that is as a manufacturer in the assistive technology space. When people give us feedback, we take that very seriously. Not only does it help to motivate and inspire us, but it helps us to understand what changes and improvements we can make. We have people giving us feedback on bugs and adding new features all the time. We have requests. As an example, we had a request from a racing fan who was blind to make a racing game so they could experience what it would be like to drive around the track. And so we did. We released a racing game where that you can drive a car around a track on the Cadence and have just as much fun as a real driver without the danger of suddenly crashing into a wall in real life, so to speak. We had a young boy who is a cancer survivor who had lost his vision. A 14-year-old boy. He lives in rural Alabama, and his favorite game to play was Minecraft. But once he lost his vision, he wasn't able to play Minecraft anymore. So we worked with Microsoft to release a Minecraft mod so that now blind people can play Minecraft. Just things like that happen almost every day. And that's really the reason that we got into this in the first place.
Right. Wow. Fantastic. Just like you said, so many stories. And I keep thinking of you mentioning, you know, from 3 to 90 years of age, folks that have used the device, and just so many across such a swath of, you know, people and walks of lives. And it's really something.
Well, our goal is that every person who needs one of these can get one somehow. And hopefully we will continue working very hard over the next coming years to make that happen.
Right. Excellent. All right. So before we put a bow on this episode, if you just want to share any kind of contact info, or if folks want to read up on the Cadence and your company.
Sure. So the name of the company is Tactile Engineering, and you can go to our website, which is www.tactile-engineering.com. That's TACTILE-engineering.com. And if you'd like to reach out to me directly, feel free to pass my information along to listeners who inquire.
Excellent. Will do. And I'll definitely include a link to that website in the show notes as well.
Outstanding. I really enjoyed having a chance to talk about this, and I really support the goal of this podcast. I think the idea of making sports more enjoyable for everyone is something that can really bring us all together. And I would love to see more people truly be able to access sporting events and participate in sports. And we just kind of have that mission as a long-term goal for all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely my goal here with this podcast. Obviously raising awareness about adaptive sports, but also just, being a fan of a sport and being able to enjoy it and maximize the enjoyment and satisfaction of fandom as well. So again, we've been visiting with Dave Schleppenbach. And Dave, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed this conversation, and just kudos to you and thank you for all you're doing in your work.
Well, thank you so much. I was delighted to be here, and I'd love to come back again.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Thanks again. To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter @eyesfreesports.